All right,
And are
everybody.
you,
Huh?
hold on, are you getting any background noise because the rain's so loud here?
No. How about me?
Okay. No.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for attending today's webinar workshop on increasing your lawn and landscape sales, featuring Rob McCoy at Holganix. Rob, do you want to say
Hello,
hello?
everyone. Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Rob is our national sales manager at Holganix, but prior to Holganix, he's both run and built lawn and landscape companies. Rob, could you talk a little bit about your background?
Well, I unexpectedly started as a lawn care technician in 1997 and kind of graduated through a bunch of different positions within the lawn care industry and eventually owned my own lawn care company. So I understand the importance of sales and how it can drive your company. But probably more importantly, once I joined Holganix, I had the opportunity to talk to lawn care and landscape companies all throughout the country and really pick their brain and find out what was working and what wasn't working, and was able to identify, if I was to do it again, where would I invest my money to get the best bang for the buck.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And not on here is myself. My name's Katie, and I'm going to be today's DJ of the webinar. So speaking of which, this is our agenda at the moment. We've got, we're going to have a conversation on measuring success, building a marketing plan, things to consider, designing a referral program, a cancel save process, the fact that everyone is a salesperson, and planning for prepays. We're also then going to go into resources and audience Q&A. This webinar is supposed to be 30 minutes. We're going to do our best to keep to that.
I'll do my best.
So, Rob, you had me throw this slide in with this specific quote for a reason. Do you want to read it off to the audience?
Sure. Good fortune is what happens when opportunity meets with planning. I think it's really important to have a good plan, and I'd be able to take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. You don't want to be surprised by anything, so you want to do your best to come up with a plan, even though it's probably always going to change. But that preparation is key.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to stress, this past spring, I imagine a lot of our customers and the folks in the community have probably been hit hard with COVID and COVID restrictions. And we may not have been able to grow and meet the levels that we wanted to in the spring, but sitting down today and getting more focused on your marketing and sales plan for the fall is just one of those ways that as organizations, we can get caught back up towards reaching that goal.
Absolutely.
All right. So as you're looking at developing a sales and marketing plan in the fall, it starts with planning. Rob, do you want to talk about some of these KPIs, key performance indicators, and some of the other items we have listed here?
Sure. Well, obviously, you can see the first bullet point there. Start with a revenue goal. You always want to have a goal that you can that's meaningful to you. So you want to look at where you are in your production schedule, where it makes sense to be the most profitable. Oftentimes lawn care and landscape companies kind of grow in plateaus because of productivity based on the equipment that you have and the personnel that you have. So make sure that you identify a meaningful goal so that you can try and plan around that. And then understanding what your cost per sale is going to be based on the plan that you have is important. I mentioned the profitability. You can hit profitability through the type of customer that you go after or the amount of customers that you go after. And what I mean by that is, if you are targeting the neighbors of existing customers, obviously that's going to be more profitable. But you could also say that your technicians can do 400 properties per round, and that's kind of what you have for one setup. But you have 1,000 customers right now, and you know that your profitability will increase dramatically if you get to 1,200 customers, because then that's 3 full trucks rather than having 2.5. So either way, you want to know what your cost per sale is so that it can relate back to your profitability. What's your budget? I mean, that to me, my budget was always dictated by the profitability. I was willing to put any money into sales that I had to in order to get more in return. I can remember my first year in business, I barely took any money out of the business. Everything went back into sales and marketing, and it paid huge dividends. So, consider what profit can be made before you identify what your budget is. But then obviously when you're identifying your budget, you need to know what your cost per sale is, so that you can kind of hit that target range. It's a lot of moving parts that you kind of have to weigh out to figure out what the most effective budget will be.
Mm-hmm.
And then content calendar, we're going to elaborate more on that as far as like having that plan. And then what's your competition doing? It's important to understand what they're doing, and maybe that's not what you want to do, but also you want to identify what's working. And then the Golden Street approach, we're going to go into that in detail in a little bit.
Thanks, Rob. And I know as folks look at the fall, we want to be thinking long term about the lifetime value of a customer and what a full season would look like in terms of a revenue goal. But it's also important to look at the next 2 quarters, which is Q3 and Q4 look like for you. Rob, and I know this is also seasonal, is there a certain percentage of revenue that folks can expect to get in the fall compared to the year? Like, is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 25-75 split?
Well, it depends on how you have your pricing set up. But if you strictly look at lawn care, just doing lawn care applications and not so much on the landscaping side of it, lawn care, you have a lot of ability to do dramatic improvements in the fall, because you often have more availability to do aeration and overseeding. And aeration and overseeding, frankly, by itself can be the cost of an entire lawn care program of fertilizing and weed control throughout the season. So if you pair those two things together, what you have left on the year and the aeration and overseeding, you can kind of look at it as a fall transformation program. Pair the two things together, and for all those customers that you may acquire, either because they haven't done anything or because your competition isn't, living up to the expectations that they set, you can really make a lot of progress in that amount of time, and feel good about the revenue that you can pull in that would typically be more than just selling a standard program. For example, if you had a 6-step program as your standard program, you may have the equivalent of a 9-step program that you're selling now because of the aeration and overseeding included in it.
Great point. Thanks, Rob. All right. So on to the content calendar, excuse me. So content calendars, they're planned out on a quarterly or monthly and weekly basis. And it's a combination of all of the different types of content that you're going to be creating, whether that's a social media post or a blog post or a postcard, and how they're going out with each of those channels. It can be organized to be campaign specific, and we encourage you to do that. For some free templates, definitely check out this link. I'll send it out to the folks after the webinar as well. All right, guys, so here's an example of a content calendar for a week. And you can see how this company is laying out all of their different pieces that are going out regardless of the channel. So here's an example of the channels that they have pushing out. And in some instances, they're pushing out a specific campaign. Like, for example, this Academy article might be a campaign that they're running. But
And
here's
Katie,
one. Yeah, go ahead.
something that I think is really important when you think about a content calendar, and you're like the master of content calendars to me, but when from just strictly a sales perspective, 2% of the sales are made on the first contact, 3% of the sales are made on the second contact, 5% of sales are made on the third contact, 10% of sales are made on the fourth contact, and 80% of the sales are made on the 5th to 12th contact. So when you think about a content calendar, the reason why you have to have so many contact points is because you're typically not going to make your sales until the 5th to 12th contact. So I think that it's not just different modes of contacting, but you actually have to have this many contact points.
Definitely. And I also want to specify that it's not just about the marketing pieces that you're pushing out, but if you're doing a telemarketing campaign following up from, let's say, a direct mail piece or an email blast, that's going to help make that specific marketing piece more effective.
Yeah, and even with like the sales that we do, our sales guys make sure that we try and contact our prospects in multiple different ways. So that could be through email, through text message, through phone calls, through mail, through physical visits, because you just don't know what's going to be appealing to someone. So if it's direct mail followed up by a telemarketing campaign, by a knock on the door or something like that, you want to have that variety in
there. Yeah. And this one is just an example of, you could literally go out with sticky notes and start planning. It doesn't have to be something that's fancy and digital. It's about laying out what you're going to be talking about when, and making sure that piece that you're pushing out is seasonal. And as we're headed into the fall, some seasonal marketing campaigns that you might be running, like Rob mentioned in the past, is Aeration and Overseeding. And Rob, do you want to speak to a couple of other campaigns that they might be running? I know that we're going to be going into some of that later, but just as a teaser.
Well, in the fall, you don't have quite the variety that you do throughout the rest of the season, but you may have times where you're doing grub control sales campaigns. You may have times where you're doing tree and shrub, flea and tick, standard lawn care, and aeration and overseeding, as you mentioned. They all have, you may have a kind of a set system that works for attaining these sales, but there's definitely different contact points that are more effective at different times of the year because of people's availability, what they're going to be looking at. Is it a hectic time of year because of school starting and, people being preoccupied with that you may not have time for a conversation, but it may still be a priority for them. So it may be more of the written approach rather than a conversation at that point in time. Whereas in the summer, even though you're dodging vacation time, you can still be having conversations and scheduled conversations that can be extremely effective.
Mm-hmm. And another big campaign we see running this time, not necessarily right now this time of the year, but in the fall, we're going to be talking a little bit about it, is your prepays.
Yeah.
So, and I know
you want to make sure your prepays go out before you're finished your last application. That is a critical point.
All right. So here's one of your favorite topics, Rob, the Golden Street approach. Can you talk a little bit about this?
So when I'll go back like 20 years because this was an approach that we recognized back then and it really worked well. Basically, we started to identify that we had really profitable routes within our company. And it came down to select neighborhoods and subdivisions. And we were able to identify how much more profitable we were on certain streets. So when we recognized that, we realized, like, well, if we keep getting customers on these streets, we're going to keep increasing our profitability. So we were willing to spend more money. We talked about cost per sale previously. We were able to have a higher cost per sale because our profitability was so much higher. So, you know, we had, I could think of one neighborhood where we had over 200 customers. The neighborhood next to that, we had about 80 customers. The neighborhood down the street, we had about 70 customers. You can imagine the density that you have there. And these were not large subdivisions. Like, we were talking about, we had 200 customers out of 250 in the neighborhood. And they were all 1 acre lots. So it was a lot of production getting done there. But the important point when you think about sales was we hammered that area. I mean, we were there out and visible all the time. We were sponsoring 5K runs. We were doing anything we possibly could to be the lawn care company in that subdivision. And it paid off huge because of the profitability. Now, specifically, when it comes to a Golden Street approach in the fall, we found it to be extremely effective to pair it with aeration and overseeding. So the reason why that worked really well is aeration and overseeding was more time consuming than a regular application. So if you had sales reps out there with people doing the aeration and overseeding, they had time to knock on doors and have a conversation with somebody. And regardless of whether they had another lawn care company or not, they would still take the aeration and overseeding that day because it was getting done at their neighbor's house. So it was a really effective way to not just increase aeration and overseeding sales, but that led into, hey, remember that phenomenal job that we did on your aeration and overseeding? The following spring, it was much easier to acquire them as a new customer, if not within that fall. So taking the Golden Street approach of identifying, what's the right demographic, what's the subdivision that you want to get, and increasing your profitability there because it's already profitable. It's much easier to maximize that than to try and find a new subdivision and develop that from scratch.
So Rob, as we talk about the competition, you alluded to this a little bit later, or earlier rather, but we talked about the fact that you need to be routinely checking on the competition, both in their digital and their print advertising. So if you see their postcards in the mail or such, hang on to them so you know what they're going after, what campaigns they're targeting. And digitally, you can be following them on social media. You can also set up Google alerts so that anytime that they post something online, you are alerted to that piece of content they're dishing out. Rob, is there anything else you want to go ahead?
Yeah, there's a really simple method for this that's kind of like the on the ground floor. That is, you have your close circle of friends and family. If you can have them getting estimates and collect the information from them, you really tend to get a lot. I mean, we had a library full of all the mailings. Every single employee brought the mailings back in. It was not necessarily a requirement, but it was encouraged, so that we could build up a huge library of all the different offers that were provided by our competition. And not only that, we were getting estimates on those. So it was very easy to get an estimate without getting involved in a large conversation or anything, or wasting a lot of time. But when you compile all that information and you see this person's offering a free application, this person's offering this other program, this person's offering a discount on the first application, all of those offers, not only what you're going against, but you may see that there's something that's appealing to you because of how it fits into your business model. So I always thought that was a really important aspect that everybody can do very quickly. Contact your family, contact your friends, and say, like, hey, anything that you're getting, keep it off to the side. I'll pick it up from you, and it's valuable to us so that we can learn what our competition's doing.
Great point, Rob. So here's another one of your favorite topics, the referral program.
So I love if you have a good referral program, you can build a business very efficiently, because really, there's so much attention that gets paid to the job that you do out on the lawns. And there's different business models for lawn care. You can be a turn and burn type of lawn care company where you're focused on, just how many sales can you get, and you're keeping your costs as low as possible on the agronomic side of it. But that's not typical. I mean, there is the mammoth lawn care companies out there that focus on it that way, where they're just acquiring other lawn care companies and just churning through customers and have a huge turnover. But typically for the customers that we're working with, you're focused on providing the best agronomic result that you can. And in doing that, you want to make sure that you capitalize on the marketing and sales value of that. So if you have a good referral program and it's constantly encouraged, and you're giving out reasonable rewards for that, you're making sure that there's recognition on a regular basis. I think that is really the way to take advantage of the agronomic approach that you're taking, and helping that build your business through a referral program. Some of the ideas that have really worked well were gift cards, and that could be for a local restaurant in the area, because that has some shelf life to it. If somebody's going out to dinner because of a referral that they gave, they're going to remember why they're at that dinner. And you can actually pair up with a local restaurant that is a small business like yours, that is, you may even have friends and family that are restaurant owners, that are willing to say, like, all right, well, if you purchase this many from me, I'm going to give you this discount. So it still holds the same value, but you're not paying as much, and it's helping you build your business and their business at the same time. So I think that is a really good approach. But when you're thinking about your referral program, there's two aspects that I would focus on. One is, if you're expanding your services, make sure that your referral program includes those services. And what I mean by that is that if you are typically offering a lawn care program and you're expanding into tree and shrub, well, for every referral, don't necessarily give a credit of for lawn care services. Give it for a service that they don't currently receive. So it introduces them into another aspect of your business. And I forget what the other one was right now, but it'll probably come to me in like 30 seconds.
Okay, cool. All right, so one of the things that perhaps sometimes small businesses don't like to talk about is canceled customers, but it's actually a low-hanging fruit in terms of a list. Can you talk about cancels, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. So at one point in time when I was working with a lawn care company, we had a large cancel list, and we were able to save a tremendous amount of that. And the key was really just getting in communication with them. These are people that, one of the number one hurdles of acquiring a new customer is getting someone that is breaking the barrier of paying you. That doesn't mean that they don't want to pay you, but that's the actual purchase, is when they make payment. These people have already trusted you enough to get to that point. Now, there could be a multitude of different reasons as to why they would cancel. It could be timing of service. It could be the results. It could be the customer service. It could be a variety of different things. The key is, once you get them in communication, how can you get them to explain to you exactly what happened? Have a set value that you're willing to pay to get those customers back. And then you offer to them in services. Because that has value to them. If they have a problem that they're facing on the lawn, the person who is just talking to them has to know that, hey, it may be something as simple as, you can, without looking for approval from anyone else, you can give the value of 2 applications away in order to get them back on the service. The reason why you want to focus on this is you don't want the negative publicity out there that somebody's, and if you let them just cancel and move on to another company, you're never going to be able to put your best foot forward. So you want to make sure that you don't have the negativity out there. You do everything that you can to get them back. They still have that value as a new customer, and you're avoiding the negative value that could come with them staying as a canceled customer.
Rob, as we talk about our current customers, there's a lot we could do proactively to both identify that a customer may not be happy, but also to solve that customer's problem before they become a canceled customer. These were 3 of the points that you had mentioned before. I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, the scheduled seasonal check-ins is critical. It's always easier to take care of a problem when you're the one identifying it rather than them identifying it. And you can do that through the pictures of the before and afters. But if you're a little bit behind on that, the NPS scores are great, doing those surveys just to get that feedback before they get to the point where they want to cancel. Finding out there's a problem means that you can provide a solution. If they cancel and you never find out the problem, then you may be out of luck because they may be hard to get a hold of. You may never have that point to communicate with them again. So as long as they're still a customer and you identify a problem, that's actually a great opportunity to put your best foot forward and make sure that you keep them. It's a lot easier to keep a disgruntled customer than to reacquire a canceled customer.
And Rob, the NPS score, that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's simply asking, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend XYZ lawn care to a friend?
Yeah, and you hit on a really important point there. What I always wanted to know from my customers was, how likely are you to recommend my service to one of your friends or family? Because if they were likely to do that, you're encouraging it right there. But that's really the key. Is I'm not just trying to have satisfied customers. I'm trying to get loyal customers that are going to refer my business. And we talked about referrals before and how important that is, and how much less cost there is involved in that in building your business. So if you're really getting down to the details of it, that's what you want to know from your customers. How likely are you to refer my business to one of your friends or family?
All right. You spoke a little bit about some of these points as well as we talk about cancel saves, but I think there's a couple on here that we didn't hit yet.
Yeah. So this is just some guidelines that we had used in the past that worked well. We actually set it up so that you could not cancel until there was an exit interview, which is hard to enforce. But if you, kind of set the expectation for that, hey, we have a few questions that we need to ask you in order to completely cancel your service. It's only going to take 3 minutes, and typically it never takes 3 minutes, but they have that option that if it goes beyond that, then the call's done and thank you for your time. Sorry we couldn't help you. But that's part of the process that you want to create. In what are the scripted questions that you have to make sure that you get answers from? Why did you start using our service in the first place? What made you stop using the service? What are you looking for in the future for your next service? There's some really important points there. And if you find out that information, you can typically position your business to provide those services. I always like to have a single person in charge of the cancel saves. It obviously depends on the skill set that you have amongst your employees. But when you have, if you think of your cancels as real sales opportunities and you understand the value of them and the value of losing them, then it's it makes sense to have one of your best salespeople on those cancel saves. And if you can justify that they're truly canceled, it's not just a disgruntled customer that could be easily taken care of, then you have the opportunity to pay commission on that again, which makes the salesperson motivated to obviously go after those, and they can view them as easier sales opportunities than finding somebody that's completely cold and may not even be interested in lawn care. You know, that I mentioned the threshold for what they could offer. 30% was you know, a number that we had used before. 30% of their total annual value we could use to save the customer. And you may have a different number. Percentages are often easy to use if you know what your acquisition cost would typically be. And I already hit on the questions. But then even if you are past the point of saving them when they're trying to cancel, the first thing that we hit every single spring was the cancel customers from the previous 2 years, because it gave them an opportunity to see what other lawn care companies were doing, and they may have realized by that point in time, hey, they weren't a better lawn care service. I should have just stayed with you guys, and you have that opportunity to resell them at that point in time.
All right. So it's not just about having your salespeople sell people. It's about everyone selling people. Rob, can you talk a little bit to this point as well?
Yeah, this is an important point. If everyone in the company understands that they have the opportunity to make sales, you're going to get a lot more sales. And that doesn't mean that you're going to have a secretary that's making 10 sales a day, or a lawn care technician that is, you know, making 4 sales a day or anything like that. But it does make it so that when opportunities present themselves, that they take advantage of them. You know, typically prospects are going to make a purchase emotionally. So if they're approaching a technician, let's say, when they're out treating another property, there's a sale to be made. If somebody walks up to you and starts a conversation with you, I mean, when I was a technician, I would tell you that, like, you sold that 100% of the time, because it was too easy not to. You were or too easy to sell it, because you were there at their property. They wanted to talk to you. You had the solution probably on your truck with you. And the best part about it was, most people don't want to be sold by a salesperson. So they never viewed the technician as a salesperson. They just viewed it as somebody that could give them real concrete answers to the problems that they were having on their lawn. So if you can, and I would say even start with your technicians as far as sales training, keeping a simple process for them, making sure that they have sales sheets in their trucks so that they can convert some of those opportunities. They can earn extra money. You know, I remember several times where I had technicians come to me and say, hey, I'd like to earn some extra, you know, not extra, I'd like to earn more money. I'd like to have a raise. And then we would dive into, well, what type of opportunities do you see when you're out there? How many times do people come up to you and talk to you? Well, I avoid them. You know, there's people trying to come up to me all the time. Well, what if you didn't avoid them? How many do you think you could close? What training do you need to close them? Because maybe you offer them a 6% commission or 5% commission on those new sales. All of a sudden you can calculate, all right, well, you know, if 10 people were going to come up to you through a week and you just sold half of them, you know, the value of a customer is $500 a year. You're going to get 5%. So that's $25. Well, you just made an extra $125 a week then. So that type of thing for a technician is really important. The other thing that is a leverage point for the technician is they're not just motivated to make the extra money, but they also create density in their own routes. because they're not going away from their route to make the sales. They're selling somebody at a current stop typically. So not only should you be willing to pay the commission there, but you should be thrilled to pay the commission there, because that's a highly profitable customer that is going to now be 2 applications at one stop rather than 1 application or at one stop.
So we talked about the fact that Q3 and Q4 prepays were going to be a big deal. And you also mentioned at one point, Rob, that your prepay should be out before your last application.
Yeah, that's really the timing is everything bullet point there.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly what I'm talking about with the last application. The reason that you want to have your prepays out before your last application is because your customer's perception of the service that they're getting is not always the same as the service you're providing. And what I mean by that is, even though a lawn care company can have a service that continues from year to year, and someone just has to call to cancel their service or stop it at any point in time, they don't necessarily think of it that way. So if you have, depending upon where you are in the country, if you have a lapse over the winter where you're not doing services, to those customers, a high percentage of them feel as though their service is done. They can go with another lawn care company at that point. You kind of, did all the services that were previously discussed. If you get your prepays out before your last service is completed, they're still your customer. A lot of times people will, just through the busyness of life and having a million things to manage just to run a household, they will just continue the service because it'll be the conversation of a husband and wife talking to each other saying, hey, were you happy with the service this year? Yeah, they were decent. All right, well, I'm just gonna get this savings and prepay for next year. All right, fine, go ahead. And that's the extent of the conversation, rather than an evaluation process when all your competition comes into play and they're going after everybody that is available, which is your customers on top of everyone else. You don't want to get into the comparisons of different lawn care companies if you can avoid it. So not only does it help you retain your customers, but you typically get a much higher prepay amount percentage when you send them out at that point in time.
So we talked a lot about tons of different tools and tricks that you could do as you're looking at the fall. Here's a bunch of the resources we talked about. I'm going to be sending this out after this webinar with the actual links in it, so you'll be able to check them out then. But at the bottom of this page, you can see this section that says marketing support. Holganix has developed tons of awesome marketing tools that you can literally download, for example, some social media graphics or a video or so on, and you can rope that into your own pieces of content that you're dishing out. We also have a lot of webinars. This is just one of them. In fact, later on this week, we have Building Your Fall Fertilizer program scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern. That'll wrap up our summer webinar series, and then we'll start to get back into webinars again later on in the fall.
And I would say a really important point to, fall sales, everybody focuses on spring sales because that's when you can acquire a lot of customers, a lot of new customers. But the fall is when you acquire a lot of profitable customers. And if you really think about what you're trying to accomplish in business, it's profitability. So if you think about it as like a puzzle, the pieces that come in the fall are the ones that complete the picture. The pieces that you get in the spring are like the ones that start the picture. So you want to make sure that you get that complete picture for your routes, for where you have customers. It's typically the best time to make improvements at people's properties in a short period of time, because you can incorporate the seeding into it, and you can just, frankly, you can use different fertilizers and weed controls. The weather becomes favorable, so the weather's working with you. So I say take advantage of that, and make your business more profitable in the fall, and rather than just focusing on the growth.
That's a great closing point, Rob. Thanks. And with that, if anybody has any additional questions, they're welcome to reach out to Rob directly. Rob, we did provide your email address. Folks can
Sweet.
reach out using that. But thank you so much to everybody that attended today. I know it's really difficult sometimes to to step aside from work and actually think about planning the fall now in the summer. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys took the time to do it. I will say that we covered a lot of ground today, and I would encourage everybody not to get too overwhelmed with the content we provided, but rather to think about the 1, 2, or 3 takeaways that you got from this webinar that you want to put into practice in your business starting today.
And if it makes more sense to have a conversation, and you have my email here, don't bother asking all the questions on the email. Just ask for, hey, when's time that we can get together and talk, and I'll happy to schedule some time and have a conversation with you so that we can make sure that we're talking about what really fits into your business.
Thanks, Rob. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great Tuesday.